What are the top 5 assistants or assisting champions in game, and why do you need to get them as soon as you can? First of all, you're probably wondering, what is an assistant champion? What's an assist champion? Basically, it's those that assist your team. In any given situation, you might need a various different type of improvement. Maybe a buff, maybe a debuff, maybe a passive debuff. And these particular champions in the top 5 list that we've got will help out your team and are so important to players, and you should look to get them, or at least put the effort in things like Arena, or try to acquire them, because they will do wonders for your roster. So let's start off the list, and I've got some notes which will be in the description if you want to find out a little bit more about the process of these champions and why do you need them. Just that you know, in the video there will be lots of different footage from Act 6, Act 6.2.2, Act 6 in general, Act 7, we've even got Cavalier difficulty, lots of different things will be covered on this, so it's not going to be a case of me just going, here's the champion and here's a little spiel and that's all you see. There's going to be footage over the top of it as well. Now, in at number 5, it's got to be Apocalypse. Apocalypse is a very one-class assisting champion. He's good in his own rights to support himself, but as well, his base improvements to any mutant champ after any genetic code build is great. You get bleed resistance and indefinite prowess, increasing special attack damage, 30% offensive ability. You go unblockable for 2 seconds when the opponent purifies a debuff, and once per fight, unstoppable for 3 seconds when struck. But what he does to the likes of Wolverine, Cable and Archangel via synergies is insane, and some of that footage will be showcased on screen right now. From myself taking in a Wolverine as a 4-star against 6 stars in the side event this month. Also with Archangel being able to do some amazing damages and as well getting that unblockable, but just the amount of bleed damage and neurotoxin damage is pretty darn insane. The only reason he's 5th on my list is because it's one-dimensional. It's just a case he can assist mutants. It's not a case he can assist all other different types of champions. But Apocalypse is not just about like that. It's always about, like, you know, singular champion and also assisting a mutant-based team. So there are some good side things and some bad. In at number 4 is Heimdall. So with Heimdall, I would say that this is a great champion for adding things when it comes to buffs. Now, it's a case it's very synergy driven. So if you want a regen buff, you're going to have to bring either Loki or Thor Ragnarok. If you want a Fury buff, you've got to bring in the likes of Angela or Hela. And if you want yourself the little precision buff, then you're going to need to bring in Magic or Guillotine. Now, this is wherein lies the problem of the specific nature of now creating a synergy team. This means that other slots in your team, similar to the same problem with Apocalypse, it becomes very kind of like specific, and your scope and coverage isn't at times there, because let's face it, new nodes requires new thoughts of how to take them down. But that doesn't mean to say it takes away anything from Heimdall, because he's still a great champion for assistance. Just a shame he can't operate on his own the way that a lot of champions in his list will indeed do that. Chan can be added to any team to add a Fury buff, which is very important. Like taking the likes of Act 6.2.2 Mr Sinsiter with Caustic Temper means that you will need to have a poison immune champion that also has a Fury buff, which is sort of possible with certain champions. And there are some options which I personally liked more than others. Like before, I mean, I'll give a perfect example. I'm throwing, first of all, footage of myself using She-Hulk against Mr Sinsiter, but in the past I've used Warlock. Warlock does have a synergy that allows him to, when he's hit by a poison debuff, so something he's immune to, he'll get a Fury buff. You have to have a 5-star Vision, Age of Ultron, or Vision Classic, or a Ultron. Now, here's the thing with this, I didn't have, at the time, any of those options. It was only from 100%ing Labyrinth of Legends I managed to pick up an Ultron, Ultron, whatever is Labyrinth of Legends, and whatever version that's the Prime version, sorry, and was able to use that to then get through the content. But that's not an option for everybody. And it may be a case of checking out, you got a Poison Immune champion with the Heimdall synergy with Angela, but that's 2 extra slots that you've taken up, and can be quite annoying because then it could be quite restrictive against the team that you're trying to take through. So that's the only criticism why I've put this in at number 4. But this has been a great champion for usage in things like Labyrinth of Legends and Abyss of Legends, where the first time going through and having the likes of Aegon means that I'm able to still remain high in the fight, to have the intercede, which is just having the champion solely in there. So if you have the champion just by himself, it does mean that once per fight, Heimdall intercedes on your behalf and gets an indestructible and unstoppable buff for 2 seconds. Again, allowing you to be more kind of like in the fight for longer. But as I said, there are problems with this. Even more so if you're looking for a counter to the likes of 6.1.6 buffed up, is that lane does require you to have 3 buffs. Again, this means that you would have to have all of the champions that are in the synergy groups in order to take on the path, which isn't always ideal, and why that's one champion that's on our list that is an assistance champion that's actually, as a solo singular option, a little bit better, which actually takes up our number 3 slot. Number 3 on our list, and it's one of my favourites, and that is Odin. Even though Kabam didn't 100% do it to the solid nature that I would have wanted as a character, he's still a great option as assisting champion. His pre-fight and cross-fight abilities allow him to create 3 buffs for your champion. This can be great for different areas, as well as being a great cosmic champion and a great solo champion you can play in your own right. There are some great benefits to having this in your roster. In certain Cavalier difficulties, buffed up node as well interactions, Odin can massively assist, especially because he's able to give those 3 buffs to any kind of champion, and this as well can add into extra benefits. His aptitude buff in particular can ramp up champions like Hyperion, Medusa and Venom to do some incredible damage. And one of the bits of footage that I'm throwing up is going to be some Medusa footage that I created, and that was again using this aptitude buff, which I actually love. It's even better if you've got yourself a little Black Bolt synergy for that Inhumans Royal Family synergy with just like great potency. Just comes absolute fun, and that's something I really like. It also can be an option to take into the likes of Act 6.1.6, which I talked about. There is a lane that sees you fight off against Miles Morales, and then you've got against Scarlet Witch, you've got fights against MCOC. There's so many fights on that lane, which is kind of like important because it's not just about champions that create buffs. The Cosmic Lion has a lot of champions that create buffs, but at the same time, if you've got certain champions that create just the 1 buff or no buffs, then it does mean if you put on the Thunderstruck buff, the Draupnir buff, and the Stormbreaker buff, which is the cross-fights or pre-fights, it does mean that you're able to use champions that not necessarily you take up against buffed up in against buffed up. This means you can take on champions that have MCOC with the auto fight and Miles Morales with evade and miss abilities, taking champions that interact and suppress things, like those particular things that maybe you find difficult. It means that this one champion slot taker, which is indeed, Odin, can open up possibilities for your roster and make it less restrictive, and becomes a great option for coverage, rather than, again, Heimdall, which requires multiple champions to create buffs, and also Apocalypse, which is very narrow to one specific class. Now in at number 2, and this was a difficult one, is Mr Fantastic. As a solo champion, he is able to do some great stuff with interaction, taking on champions that have regeneration abilities that just throw some SP2s together and you're finding that you're reversing some hella regen. I mean, check out stuff that he's done against the likes of Wolverine, and also content that I've posted on the channel with Act 7.2 interaction, which is some of the footage you'll actually see showcasing him as a solo champion. But his pre-fights and cross-fights allow champions to really take control of situations, suppressing things like regen, as we said, as well as lower down the rate of power, and even the damage potential from certain debuffs. He's also a great champion that is able to open up and create debuffs. With a champion like Red Guardian, which you're going to see footage on screen in a moment, giving an extra punch on damage, because the champion's abilities does mean that Red Guardian has to have unique debuffs, and it means that the rotation of damage can actually be quite beneficial by having the likes of Mr Fantastic on the team. As well as, if you're looking at other options to take on regen champions in general, Mr Sinisters, and any other champion that highly regens, and any kind of node interaction. I mean, check out what happened with the Venom Pool fight of Variant 8 in the last month. You can also take on any champ with this, and you have some fun. Axe 7.2, Axe 6, I've used him in so many things. That suppression, petrification ray, and just lowering down combat power rate is just a massive help when it comes to being an assisting champion. And yeah, a lot of these champions we featured on our list are pre-fight and cross-fight, but I think that these are the ones that are going to help out to give extra options. And as well, same principle, it's a singular champion that is benefiting from this particular stuff. Or a singular champion within the team to benefit the team is what I was meant to say. This finally leads us on to a champion which I think is one of the best assistant champions, and that's a difficult one to kind of like argue with Mr Fantastic. If I was to put them, I would probably say joint first, because that's what they do. Their pre-fights and cross-fights are massively beneficial, but I think like Magneto, House of X slightly edges it, because of the value that he presents in taking on different content. He becomes an option when nothing else is another option, and as well is still a champion that singularly delivers in going up against various different champions on the team, but being still one champion out of 4 other champions that are able to do other things. But man, that passive parry is big. Now, it could be argued that the guidance boost, which is the thing that we're going to be, you know, talking about or promoting here, is very specific. But here's the great thing about it. This particular pre-fight for #metal and hero attackers triggers a passive stun, which is in line with the effect of parry mastery instead of debuffs, which gain a plus 0.5 seconds duration. This means that taking a champion against certain situations is a great option. We've definitely seen this, and I'm going to show footage of what he's been able to do in cabinet difficulty, as well as going up against 6.2.5 Mordo boss. So the passive stun is huge. This can bypass champs like Mordo in 6.2.5, which, as you know, if you hit whilst he is stunned, he astral evades, which can lead to you being degen. So the method becomes somewhat of a massive cheese to take down some of the most difficult content. The other thing is a counter to, if timed right, the new root mechanic, which you'll see in footage on screen against Kraven this month. This is also double effective when the enemies have things like Mighty Charge, which shrugs off debuffs when dashing at you. So this passive stun is massive. Magneto, House of X, or White Mags is very difficult to pick up. When arenas come round, I do recommend grabbing him, because he is, as I said, a option to situations. Using the 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, 6-star version is still great, but having him as an option to take on different champions and kind of do the damage and do the business that needs to be done is still important. And dealing with champions that #metal, you know, puts him into his own perspective in light of being helpful and being a great champion. But I would say that it's just the emphasis on that passive stun, that passive parry, which allows to take on some very, very curious things. Like this month, anything that was Mighty Charge, this champion does interactions and wonders. Some of the Cavalier nodes as well really put him into contention of usage. And if you're looking for options to take on champions that shrug off debuffs and need something that's more passive debuff or passive effect, then this indeed is an option. So as a boss killer assistant, I kind of feel like he gives more value, especially because he's reducing down things like your revive spend, your unit spend, and health potion spend, or whatever spend that you normally would do against some bosses. So yeah, White Magneto opens up a lot of potential, a lot of options, and incredibly helpful at taking down stuff. And basically being that, let's just say, random option that is total cheese, which is so satisfying when you find a counter to certain situations and go like, oh, kabam, haven't kind of completely ruined my day because I have House of X Magneto white version. So it's like, yeah, it's really kind of fun option, and that's why I rate it as one of the best assistance champions to help players out. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, hopefully going to make some more videos like this in the future. But because it took, I think it's going to take 10 hours to kind of create this particular video, from grabbing content, kind of putting everything together and scripting and stuff, we'll have to see how well people are interested in it and that stuff. But thanks for watching this video. Appreciate you. Check out some other content located on screen right about now, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye for now.